Hello everyone, today we bring you the heart-touching story of Neil, a simple fisherman with big dreams. From struggles to success, his journey will inspire you to never give up. Stay with us till the end and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more emotional stories. Let's start. In the small coastal town of Seabreeze Harbor, time felt as if it stood still. The blue sky stretched endlessly, the salty breeze danced through the air, and the waves crashed against the shore, painting a scene that felt almost like a dream. But behind this serene beauty lay harsh realities, poverty, hard work, and the daily struggles that defined every household. At the very edge of the town stood a small weathered shack with a roof that trembled during every storm. That shack belonged to a young fisherman named Neil. His life was simple, but his dreams were anything but. Neil had been born on this very shore. He had taken his first steps on the soft sand and learned to swim in the same restless sea. As a boy, while other children played on the beach, Neil went out on the boat with his father, learning the art of fishing. His father often told him, "Son, the sea is both a friend and an enemy. Love it and it will give you life. Disrespect it and it will swallow you whole." Those words etched themselves deep into Neil's heart. But Neil was different from everyone else. While others returned home after long days of hard work and drifted into deep sleep, Neil would sit quietly by the shore, staring at the endless waves, as if trying to understand their language. In the silence of the night, when only the wind whispered, Neil often spoke softly to the waves. "Show me the way, just once. Let me understand you." The villagers laughed at him. They called him the dreamer, mocking the boy who spent more time staring at the ocean than catching fish. Some teased him, calling him Dreaming Neil, but their words never bothered him. To Neil, the sea was a mystery, a puzzle he was determined to solve. He had little, an old wooden boat with broken edges and a fishing net that needed repair almost every week. But Neil never complained. He knew that to dream you didn't need a big boat or new nets, only courage. His mother, a strong yet gentle woman, often tried to bring him back to reality. "Neil, dreaming is good, but dreams don't fill empty stomachs. The sea gives us what we work for, nothing more. The rest are just stories." Neil would smile but never argue. Deep down, he knew his dreams had grown bigger than himself. They were now for his entire town. He wanted Seabreeze Harbor to be known across the world, a place where people could learn that the sea wasn't just a place for fishing, but a treasure chest of knowledge and secrets. The children of the village adored Neil. He would spend hours with them, telling tales about the mysteries of the ocean. He often said, "The sea is alive, it breathes, it listens. And if you wish with all your heart, it answers." The children would listen with wide-eyed wonder, sometimes even asking their parents why they never shared such stories. Neil found his greatest peace when he was alone, rowing his boat far out into the open waters. There, surrounded by nothing but the endless stretch of sea and sky, he felt closest to the mystery he had been chasing for years. But dreaming was easy. Turning those dreams into reality was not. Every day brought a new challenge. Violent storms, torn nets, scarce fish, and, above all, the people who mocked him for his impossible hopes. Still, Neil believed that if you had the courage to dream, you must also have the strength to endure. One evening, as the sun sank slowly beyond the horizon, painting the waves in shades of gold and crimson, Neil whispered to himself, "One day I'll find the answer. One day I'll prove that dreaming is never a waste of time." In that quiet moment, a powerful resolve took root in his heart, a resolve that would, in time, change not just his life, but the fate of the entire town. For Neil, the sea had always been a mystery, a secret hidden in the roar of the waves, a riddle that never fully revealed itself. Since childhood, he had spent countless hours sitting by the shore, his eyes tracing the horizon. Sometimes the waves were calm, like a mother's lullaby. Other times they raged wildly, like the anger of an ancient tale. It was on an ordinary morning that he heard the sea's first whisper. The golden light of dawn danced over the blue waters as Neil sat by his old boat, mending his worn-out net. Then suddenly he froze. There was something in the rhythm of the waves, a soft, fleeting murmur, almost like a voice. He tilted his head, listening carefully. Beneath the crashing sound there was a subtle message. "Find your path. The sea is yours, Neil." His heart pounded. He laughed nervously, half convinced it was just his imagination. "Maybe I'm just tired," he muttered to himself. But somewhere deep inside a spark had been lit, a quiet feeling that fate had just given him a sign. The next morning Neil set out on his boat, but this trip was different. It wasn't about fishing for the day's meal, it was about finding answers. The salty air carried a strange freshness, as if promising a new beginning. He cast his net again and again, all the while thinking about that whisper. Hours passed with little catch, until suddenly his net grew heavy. So heavy that it almost tipped his boat. When he finally pulled it in, his eyes widened in disbelief. The net was filled with the largest, shiniest fish he had ever seen, a catch worth its weight in gold. Looking up at the endless sky, Neil smiled softly. "Is this your answer, sea?" Days turned into weeks, and with each sunrise, Neil began to hear a new whisper. Sometimes the waves urged him to be patient, other times they told him to work harder, and sometimes they hinted that he was standing at the edge of a much greater journey. The villagers started to notice the change in him. The quiet, solitary fisherman now carried himself with confidence and purpose. The old fishermen would often shake their heads and say, "This boy, he talks to the sea, and the sea talks back." One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the ocean with shades of crimson and gold, Neil whispered to himself, "These whispers aren't just dreams, they're my compass." In that moment he knew for certain, the sea wasn't just his livelihood, it was his companion listening to every beat of his heart. Neil began to repair his boat with care, reinforcing the wood and saving enough to buy stronger nets. His goal was no longer just to catch fish. He wanted to understand the sea, its moods, its depths, its unspoken secrets. Every day brought a new lesson, sometimes about patience, sometimes about perseverance, and sometimes about humility. It was the kind of storm the elders whispered about, the kind that only came once in 50 years. Dark clouds devoured the sky and monstrous waves clawed at the shore. As the wind howled and the sea roared, Neil stood by his boat, tightening its ropes, refusing to leave. In the chaos, he heard it again, the whisper. This time it was stronger, clearer, and unshakably calm. "Do not fear, this is your test, Neil." The words sank deep into his heart, quieting every trace of fear. He closed his eyes, gripping the side of his boat, and made a silent vow. No matter what, he would trust the sea and never stop working. When the storm finally passed, devastation covered the village. Boats were broken, nets were torn, and homes were shattered. But Neil's boat stood untouched, still tethered firmly where he had secured it. The villagers gathered around him in awe. "How did you survive, Neil?" they asked again and again. He only smiled and said, "I listened to the sea's whisper and I believed." That moment changed everything. Neil was no longer just another fisherman. He had become a symbol of hope, a young man walking a path of faith, resilience, and hard work, guided by the silent voice of the sea. Neil's life looked ordinary on the surface, but in truth it was anything but. He was born in a small coastal village where people woke with the sunrise and returned home as dusk fell. In that little village, everyone knew each other by name, but Neil had always been different, quiet, thoughtful, and often lost in his own world. From his earliest years, Neil's life had been tied to hard work. His father was a fisherman, setting out every day in his worn wooden boat and often returning late at night with little or nothing to show for it. Poverty was a permanent guest in their home, but there was always a strange spark in his father's eyes, a quiet hope that tomorrow would somehow be better. By the time he was barely old enough to lift a net, Neil had learned to row a boat, cast a line, and read the moods of the sea. He had also learned that the ocean wasn't just a way to earn a living, it was a force that demanded patience, strength, and sacrifice. Neil's childhood was never filled with carefree games. While other children built sandcastles along the shore, Neil spent his days beside his father, hauling nets heavy with the ocean's salt. Sometimes, as he rowed under the endless stretch of blue, he would glance at the horizon and wonder, will my life always be this way? Am I destined to be just another fisherman? But the only answer he ever got was the steady rhythm of the waves, as if they wanted to speak but could never quite form the words. His mother was a gentle soul full of quiet strength. Every night she would stand by the water, whispering prayers for her son, that someday he would rise beyond the boundaries of their tiny village and see the world that lay beyond the horizon. She often told him, "Neil, life won't always stay the same. With hard work and faith, even destiny can be rewritten." Those words planted themselves deep in Neil's heart like seeds waiting for the right season to bloom. Time moved on and Neil grew into a strong, capable young man. He became one of the most skilled fishermen in the village. Others often came to him for advice, where to cast their nets when the storms would hit, and which days promised the best catch. But deep inside, Neil felt an emptiness, a quiet pull, as if something beyond the horizon was calling to him, as if there was a dream waiting out there, just for him. Many nights, when the village slept, Neil would sit alone by the shore, his gaze fixed on the restless sea. One day, he would whisper, "I'll understand this mystery. One day." His life was a blend of hard work, solitude, and quiet dreams. The villagers respected him, but his reserved nature kept him at a distance. And yet, within Neil, there was always a quiet fire, a promise to himself. I will be the one to write my own story, not just someone carried away by the tides of fate. Loneliness had always been a constant shadow in Neil's life. The villagers respected him, admired his hard work, but no one truly understood the storms hidden deep within his heart. He often sat alone by the shore, counting the waves, searching for answers in their restless voices. Solitude was both his punishment and his peace. After long, grueling days at sea, when night fell and the village grew silent, Neil would sit under the stars, holding on to the quiet company of his dreams, dreams that gave him the strength to rise again every morning. On moonlit nights, he would often walk along the shoreline, his bare feet sinking into the cool sand, whispering silent prayers into the wind. "Oh, sea, if you truly know everything, show me the way. Help me turn my mother's dreams into reality." Neil believed with an unshakable faith that one day something would change. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. That faith eased his exhaustion, turned his silence into strength, and painted his solitude with the colors of hope. In those quiet hours, he often remembered his father's words, "Son, spend time with the sea. It will teach you everything, but first learn patience," and patience became Neil's greatest gift. While other young men in the village chased shortcuts and easy gains, Neil listened to the waves, studying their rhythm, their pull, their secrets, as if they held a map to his future. One evening, as he sat in his boat, the sea calm, the air soft, and the sky clear, a strange lightness settled in his heart, as if someone had whispered, "Keep working, your time is near." That moment lit a fire within him. He decided that from now on he wouldn't cast his nets just to earn a living. He would search for something greater, a purpose that would give meaning to every ounce of his struggle. Solitude taught Neil to think deeply, to understand life in ways others couldn't. Most importantly, it taught him that hope must never die. No matter how heavy the storms, no matter how endless the darkness, as long as a single flame of faith burns in the heart, the light will always find a way to break through. Neil had been feeling something strange in the ocean waves for days. The waves that usually brought him peace now seemed to whisper a story of fear. Even the wind carried a strange tension, a warning only someone like Neil, a fisherman's son, could sense. One morning, while fixing the knots of his fishing net on the shore, old Kevin, the oldest fisherman in the village, walked toward him. His eyes held the wisdom of a lifetime spent at sea. "Neil," Kevin said with a deep breath, "this wind, it's not normal. The sea is trying to tell us something." Neil looked up at the sky. The clouds were still far away, but there was an eerie silence in the air, like the ocean itself was holding its breath, waiting for the right moment to strike. The other fishermen laughed it off, calling it a young man's fear, but the uneasiness in Neil's heart kept growing. He went home and quietly told his mother, "Mom, I won't take the boat far today. Something feels wrong about the sea." His mother looked into his serious eyes and nodded silently. She knew her son's instincts had never been wrong. By evening, as Neil stood on the shore, the winds grew stronger. The waves began to roar as if warning everyone of what was coming. Neil shouted toward his friends who were still deep in the sea casting their nets, "Hey, come back, something's not right!" But a few young men laughed and replied, "Neil, you're always scared. Look, the sky is still clear." Neil silently prayed, "Dear God, please bring them back safely. This is not the time for games." By nightfall, news of the storm started to reach the village. A radio announcement from the nearby city warned, "A massive storm is approaching the northern sea. All boats must return to shore immediately." Neil closed his eyes for a moment, silently thanking God that at least now people understood the danger. He ran to secure the ropes of the boats, helped his mother shut the windows, and warned everyone in the village that this storm would not be an ordinary one. The night sky turned pitch black. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the wind howled like it wanted to tear everything apart. Neil looked at his small boat one last time, whispering softly, "If we survive this, my friend, we'll sail again." His mother placed her hand on his shoulder and said in a calm, steady voice, "Son, be strong. Storms come and go, but brave hearts always survive." Neil smiled faintly and replied, "Mom, as long as we have faith, nothing can break us." Then came the first terrifying roar of the storm from deep within the ocean, and the entire village knew that this night would be unlike any other. Neil's heart was still restless even after the storm had passed. The sea had calmed, but its depths still held a secret that had been locked in a corner of Neil's heart for years. When he was only 8 years old, his father, George, went on a fishing trip and never returned. The villagers said the boat sank in the storm, but Neil always felt the truth was something else. That day was still etched clearly in his memory. The morning had been bright and sunny, and Neil was playing by the shore when he saw his father inside a hidden cave talking to a stranger. The sound of the waves drowned out most of their words, but one sentence reached his young ears clearly. "This secret must never be revealed, or everything will be destroyed." Little Neil never told anyone what he had heard, not even his mother. But after that day, a strange seriousness appeared on his father's face. And then, one night he took the boat out to sea and never came back. Now, years later, after the storm had shaken the village, Neil felt as if the sea was reminding him of an old promise. He often wondered, did Dad really get lost in the storm? Or did he leave carrying a secret with him? One evening, as the sun sank into the horizon, Neil walked toward that hidden cave. The cave looked the same, damp, cold, and dark. As he stepped inside, he spotted an old wooden box wedged between the rocks, covered in layers of salt. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside was an old diary, worn out by water and time. The pages were wrinkled, but a few words were still clear. "Neil, If you're reading this, know that the sea isn't just a giver of fish, it's a keeper of secrets. One day you'll have to understand them. Neil's eyes filled with both fear and wonder. His mind echoed with questions. What was the secret? What had terrified his father so much? And why was all of this connected to him? When he brought the diary home, his mother's face changed the moment she saw it. "Where did you find this, Neil?" she asked, her voice shaking. Neil silently handed her the diary. In her eyes a shadow appeared, as if she had been waiting for this moment for years but didn't have the courage to speak. That night, Neil made a decision. He would uncover the truth. Because deep down, he knew this secret held not only the answer to his father's disappearance, but also the key to his own destiny. In the stillness of the night, while the whole village slept, Neil tossed and turned in his bed. The yellow damp pages of the diary lying in front of him seemed to be calling out to him. A strange uneasiness filled his heart, as if some hidden force was pulling him toward a great revelation. Before dawn, he found himself at the shore. The waves were gently playing with the sand, and the air was filled with the salty scent of the sea. Neil opened another page of the diary, and this time the words seemed clearer than ever. "My son, this gift is not ordinary, it is the legacy of the sea. In your veins runs the blood that understands the ocean. One day, when the time comes, this gift will set you apart from others. But remember, the greater the power, the heavier its burden." Neil's hands trembled. "Legacy? What legacy?" he muttered to himself. That afternoon, while fishing on the boat, something strange happened. The sea was unusually calm. Suddenly, as if an unseen force had touched Neil's heart, he sensed a massive school of fish nearby. Leaning over the edge of the boat, he cast his net, and within moments it grew so heavy that the boat began to sway. When he pulled the net up, the old fisherman in the village gasped in shock. "This is impossible! So many fish in one net. This is magic." Neil said nothing, but deep inside he knew this was no coincidence. This was the unusual gift his father had written about. Whispers spread throughout the village. "Neil understands the language of the sea. This boy is no ordinary fisherman. He's the son of the ocean." But Neil knew the truth, that this gift, as extraordinary as it was, carried danger. If this secret ever fell into the wrong hands, not only his peace but the safety of the entire village would be at risk. That night, Neil sat by the shore staring at the waves. Softly he whispered, "Papa, if this gift is truly your legacy, tell me, how do I use it?" The moonlight danced across the waves, and for a brief moment Neil felt as if the sea had answered. Soft, quiet, but clear. "Trust the sea, Neil. But first, believe in yourself." Neil made a promise to himself. This gift would never be used for power, but to help others. Little did he know, this gift would soon lead him into a trial that would become the greatest test of his life. Neil's extraordinary talent had amazed the fishermen of the village, but the news soon spread to the city. The wealthy traders and industrialists of the nearby coastal city now knew his name. They wondered how an ordinary boy could achieve such success every single day, and why his nets were always full of fish while others returned with empty boats. One day, a group of men from the city came to the village on their boats. As Neil was unloading fish by the shore, two men stepped out of a shiny car. One of them laughed mockingly and said, "Hey Neil, son of the sea, huh? Looks like the ocean has made you its heir. What secrets are you hiding? Tell us too, or will you just keep filling your nets alone?" Neil stayed silent, but inside his heart was restless. He knew that if he revealed the truth about his powers, these people would never let him live in peace. The next day, when Neil went to the city to sell his fish, people were whispering about him. "Isn't that the boy?" "Yes, that's Neil. They say he has some kind of magic." "Magic? No man, he's a cheat. He must be using some trick." In the market, one trader crossed the line. As soon as he saw Neil, he said, "Look at this, luck's strange game." These days, luck shines on an uneducated fisherman, while people like us work hard and still end up empty-handed. These taunts pierced Neil's heart. He knew his success came from hard work and the sea's kindness, but people only saw the results, never the effort. That night, sitting by the shore, even the waves seemed sad. Drawing a line in the sand, Neil whispered softly, "Am I really wrong? Did I do something that makes people doubt me?" The sea was quiet, but in the sound of the wind, a faint whisper seemed to say, "This path is never easy, Neil. People always point fingers at the one who stands apart." The village elder, whom Neil considered his mentor, came to him and said, "Son, when light shines, darkness always tries to cover it. The people of the city will test you, they will taunt you, but you must never leave your path." Neil bowed his head in silence. Only one thought echoed in his heart: "I have to prove that my purpose is not just for me, it's for everyone." But Neil didn't know that these taunts and accusations were just the beginning. The real storm was yet to come, and it wasn't just from the sea, but from people as well. The taunts from the city and the doubts from the village had made Neil's heart unbearably heavy. Even when he went out to sea, a quiet sadness stayed with him. The waves, which once felt like his friends, now seemed silent. But life always sends a ray of light into the darkness, and for Neil that light came in the form of a new friendship. One day, as Neil was sitting by the shore repairing his boat, a soft voice broke through his thoughts. "Is this your boat? It looks really strong." Neil turned and saw a girl standing there. With golden hair, blue eyes, and a gentle smile, she looked like a dream. Her name was Amelia, and she had come from the city to the village to study the sea. "Yes, it's mine," Neil replied softly, his eyes lowering. Amelia smiled. "You're Neil, right? I've heard about you. People say you have some kind of special gift." A wave of fear rose in Neil's heart. He didn't want anyone to know his truth, but there was something pure in Amelia's eyes, as if she already understood that Neil's story was not an ordinary one. In the days that followed, Amelia often came to the shore. Sometimes she helped Neil repair his boat. Other times she asked him questions about the sea. Slowly, Neil realized that talking to Amelia made his heart feel lighter. "Why are you so connected to the sea?" Amelia asked one day. Looking at the waves, Neil said softly, "It's my friend. When everyone else left me, it stayed." Amelia smiled quietly. "Maybe that's why it understands you better than anyone." One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky was painted orange, Neil and Amelia sat by the shore watching the waves. Amelia said softly, "Neil, people will always talk, but what really matters is how you see yourself. Your hard work, your heart, that's what makes you different." Those words sank deep into Neil's heart. At that moment, he felt as if, after years, he had finally met someone who truly understood him without any selfish reason. This new friendship gave Neil new courage. Now, when the people in the city spoke with sarcasm or the villagers looked at him with doubt, Neil carried a quiet confidence on his face. He told himself, "If the sea and my friend believe in me, then I should believe in myself too." With Amelia's presence, colors returned to Neil's life. But this peace wouldn't last for long. Far out in the sea, a rising storm was signaling something, a storm that would be the next great test of Neil's destiny. Neil felt a new excitement in his life. Amelia's friendship had given him the courage that had been missing for years. Now, whenever he took his boat out to sea, his hands held the ropes with more strength, and his heart carried a strange sense of calm. He knew he was no longer just working as a fisherman, he was fighting to get closer to his dream. It was a bright morning. The air carried a light chill mixed with the salty scent of the sea. Neil pushed his boat into the water while Amelia waved from the shore as he set off. "Today, luck will be with you, Neil," Amelia shouted. Neil smiled and replied, "If the sea allows, then yes." The boat sliced through the waves, going farther into the open waters. The sunlight turned the blue sea into a golden shimmer. Neil threw his net and closed his eyes, listening to the whispers of the sea as if it was sharing a secret with him. After hours of hard work, the boat suddenly jerked. The net felt unusually heavy. Neil's heartbeat raced. He knew something big was caught. With his hands dripping in sweat, he gripped the rope tightly and pulled with all his strength. "Ah, this is so heavy," he muttered to himself. The sun was high in the sky now, and Neil's arms trembled from exhaustion, but he didn't give up. Finally, the net broke through the surface, and inside was a massive golden fish, so big that Neil's eyes widened in shock. Its body sparkled under the sunlight as if liquid gold flowed through its scales. This is the biggest catch of my life," Neil whispered in awe. When he returned to shore, the whole village gathered around. Their eyes were filled with wonder and envy. "How is this possible?" an old fisherman exclaimed. "In my whole life, I've never seen a fish this big," another said. Amelia stood in front, tears of joy shining in her eyes. She ran toward the boat and shouted, "Neil, you did it! I told you luck would be with you today." Neil's heart swelled with happiness and gratitude. Looking toward the sky, he said softly, "This is all the sea's blessing and the result of your prayers." The villagers, who once looked at Neil with doubt and mockery, now praised him with admiration. But Neil knew this was just the beginning. This success was a sign. If he kept working hard, one day he could turn his dream into reality. The next morning, Neil and Amelia sat near the boat planning their next steps. "This is just the start, Neil," Amelia said with a smile. "The sea holds many more secrets for you. You just need to know how to listen." "I'm ready, Amelia," Neil replied with determination. "No matter how hard the journey gets, I won't turn back now." From that day, not only did Neil gain new confidence, but the whole village began to see him differently. Yet he knew the sea would not always be so kind, and every success would bring with it another test. Neil's success had stirred a new wave of excitement in the village. People who once laughed at him were now full of praise. But Neil knew the sea was never always kind. It gives, but sometimes it takes away just as much. One evening, the old fisherman Martin warned him, "Neil, remember, the depths of the sea hold as much wrath as they do treasure. When the winds change and the waters start to scream, that's the time to bring your boat back to shore." Neil bowed his head respectfully but said to himself, "I understand the language of the sea and I am ready." A few days later, the weather began to shift strangely. Dark clouds gathered in the sky as if preparing for a storm. The surface of the sea fell eerily still, that stillness that warns of an approaching storm. Amelia grabbed Neil's arm at the shore. "Neil, don't go today. My heart says something bad is about to happen." Neil smiled softly. "Don't worry, Amelia. I'll be careful. I just need to check the sea for a bit." Her eyes were filled with worry, but she said nothing more. As Neil sailed into the waters, everything seemed fine at first. The air was humid, the waves calm, but as time passed, the winds grew stronger. Thunder rumbled in the sky, and the roaring wind turned the air heavy with fear. This isn't a normal storm," Neil muttered to himself as he began pulling in his nets. But the sea had already changed its mood. Suddenly, a massive wave crashed against the boat, shaking it violently. The boat tilted to one side, and water started filling in. Neil fought with all his strength to keep it steady, but the wind and the waves had turned wild. "I have to get back, now," that he told himself, but the sea seemed to have decided that today it would test Neil's courage. From the shore, the villagers watched helplessly. Amelia's screams echoed through the roaring winds. "Neil, turn the boat! Come back!" But all Neil could hear now was the deafening roar of the waves, mocking every effort he made. The boat kept plunging and rising with the waves. Neil's hands were bleeding, but he refused to give up. With every breath he prayed the same prayer, "Dear Lord, please let me reach the shore. I have to get back to Amelia." After hours of struggle, the first light of dawn broke through the clouds and the storm slowly began to calm. Neil's battered boat, broken and exhausted, somehow drifted close to shore. The villagers rushed to help, pulling Neil out of the boat. Amelia ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "I told you not to go. If something had happened to you, I'd never forgive myself." Neil, with a weak smile, held her hand and said, "The sea tested me, but I didn't give up." From that day on, Neil saw the sea not just as a source of living, but as a teacher. He learned that on the path to success, the greatest tests are of patience and courage. The storm had passed, but its marks remained, on the shoreline and in Neil's heart. Broken boats, torn nets washed ashore, and villages the sea never returned. All spoke of the emptiness and grief of that day. Neil stood on the shore staring at the water. The sea was calm now, but even in that silence there was a bitter message. Every victory comes with a price. The next morning the villagers gathered around Neil. Elder Martin spoke in his deep voice. "Neil, we all know what you saw yesterday. The sea has warned you. Remember, some battles aren't meant to be won. They're meant to teach." Neil nodded slowly, but inside another storm was raging. He knew the village needed him now more than ever. The ones who lost their homes, the ones whose boats had sunk, only one person could help them rise again, and that was him. That evening, Amelia spoke to Neil. "Neil, you always do everything for everyone else, but have you ever thought about yourself? Your dreams, your hard work, don't let them fade away." Neil placed his hand gently on her shoulder and smiled. "Amelia, my dream isn't just mine. This village is part of it too. When these people are happy, only then can I truly be happy." Neil shared his savings among the villagers to rebuild their broken boats. He even sold his own large boat to buy smaller fishing boats for the village children. Martin asked in shock, "Neil, why are you selling your boat? It's your greatest achievement." Neil said softly, "Sometimes you have to sacrifice something precious to bring someone else's dreams back to life. But sacrifice is never easy." Watching his boat drift away from the shore, Neil's eyes filled with tears. That boat wasn't just wood. It was his hard work, his success, his freedom. In that moment, Amelia held his hands and said, "Neil, this village is alive because of your strength. One day, this sea will repay your sacrifice." Days turned into weeks, and Neil's sacrifice sparked a new wave of hope in the village. People began to rebuild their broken lives, and Neil's name became etched in their hearts, a true hero. Yet deep inside, one question kept echoing in Neil's mind. Will I ever build my boat again, or has my journey ended here? The sacrifice had drained him, but it also made him stronger. Now he understood. True leadership isn't just about winning, it's about standing for others, no matter how heavy the cost. Neil's sacrifice had supported the village, but it left an emptiness in his heart. Every time he sat by the shore, watching other fishermen take their boats out to the sea, a strange pain would rise within him. The boat that once symbolized his freedom and success was now in someone else's hands. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky glowed with golden light, Martin sat beside Neil. Taking a deep breath, he said, "Neil, the sacrifice you made has become an example for this village. But son, life doesn't stop after sacrifice. It keeps moving forward. You need to find new paths." Neil quietly watched the waves and replied, "But Martin, I have nothing left now. No boat, no resources, and not even the dreams that once shone in my eyes." Martin smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Dreams never truly end, Neil. They just change shape. If you've lost one path, find another. Maybe the sea is preparing you for something greater." The next day, Neil made a decision. He would teach the village children modern fishing techniques, methods he had learned through years of experience, so the next generation could better face the storms ahead. He started a small training camp by the shore. Every morning, the children came with their old nets, and Neil showed them where and how to cast, how to read the sea's currents, and how to spot early signs of danger. Amelia often came by and said with a warm smile, "Neil, you're no longer just a fisherman. You've become a teacher." With a slight smile, Neil would reply, "Maybe this is my new path, Amelia, teaching others what I learned through difficult journeys." Within weeks, his efforts began to show results. The children not only caught fish more efficiently, but also understood the dangers of the sea much better. The villagers looked at Neil with gratitude and said, "Neil, you haven't just changed your life, you've brightened the future of our children." But Neil knew this wasn't enough. He wanted to do something that would make the village stronger and safer forever. One day, a trader arrived in the village, a man who did business in the big coastal cities. He said to Neil, "Your village has the best fish, but you don't realize its true value. If you want, I can teach you how to sell your catch for the price it truly deserves." Hearing this, a new spark of hope lit up in Neil's heart. He thought, if we can get the right value for our hard work, the children, the elders, and the women of this village can all live better lives. Maybe this is the opportunity I've been waiting for. Neil gathered the young men of the village and said, "We need to do more than just catch fish. We need to learn how to sell it, how to preserve it, and how to claim the fair price for our labor." With trust and unity, everyone joined his mission. Neil had found a new path with the sea, one where he was no longer just a fisherman, but a leader and a guide. Days later, as Neil stood on the shore watching the sun sink into the horizon, Amelia walked up beside him and softly said, "Neil, you've found your new path. You're no longer just a man, you're a dream that gives everyone the courage to move forward." Neil looked toward the sea and smiled. "Maybe the sea has been teaching me all along that paths never end. They just take new turns." A new day was rising on the village shore. The soft breeze carried the scent of the sea everywhere, and a new energy was awakening in Neil's heart. He knew that sacrifice and hardships had made his path difficult, but this journey was now moving toward the fulfillment of dreams. The children and young people of the village were no longer just ordinary fishermen testing their luck at sea. Neil had given them knowledge, the skill to read the sea, the spirit of hard work, and the courage to live bravely. Those kids who once played with old torn nets in the shadow of hopelessness now confidently handled their boats and sailed into the deep waters. Signs of prosperity began to show in the village. People were finally receiving fair prices for their hard work. Children laughed happily, and the elders proudly said, "This is all possible because of Neil's dedication and courage." One evening, as the sky turned red with the colors of sunset, Neil stood on the shore, gazing at the distant sea. Amelia quietly walked up to him and said, "Neil, do you remember when you said everything was over? Look, today you've not only changed your life, but turned the entire village's dreams into reality." Neil smiled and replied, "Yes, maybe dreams are only fulfilled when we choose to fight instead of giving up." But Neil knew the journey wasn't over yet. He had a bigger plan, to build a training center for the village children where they would not only learn to fish but also understand the dangers of the sea, the principles of trade, and the power of leadership. Martin, who now stood by Neil in every step, said with excitement, "This center will make our village an example, Neil. People will look at us and learn how hard work and unity can turn dreams into reality." Within a few months, that dream started taking shape. A small center built from wood and stone stood proudly by the shore, where children and young people came daily to learn. Neil, seeing them, silently thanked the heavens. Amelia often said, "Neil, you didn't just give us fish, you gave us the courage to live." And Neil would think to himself, maybe this is my true success, to become the fulfillment of others' dreams. The people of the village no longer saw Neil as just a fisherman, but as a leader, a teacher, and a beacon of hope. The man who was once broken by shattered dreams had now become the one weaving dreams for others. Every morning the sea waves touched his feet, as if saying, "You endured my wrath, but understood my message, and today you have become the guardian of dreams." As the first ray of sunlight touched the sea, the water sparkled as if announcing a new dawn in Neil's life. Neil stood on the shore, his eyes fixed on the waves. He knew that reaching his dreams was not the end, but the beginning of a new journey. In Neil's heart, a new resolve had formed, not just for himself but for his entire village. He had decided that no matter how many challenges came his way, he would turn the sea into a source of prosperity for his people. He planned to expand the fishing training center even further. Now he wanted the village youth to not only learn modern fishing techniques but also understand the changing nature of the sea. He wanted to teach them that hard work without knowledge is incomplete and that knowledge is the true weapon of success. One day, Martin said to Neil, "Neil, your dreams are big, but the people of the village stand with you. Together, we will make this dream a reality." With a firm tone, Neil replied, "This dream isn't just mine. It belongs to all of us. We will not see the sea as our enemy, but as our partner." The villagers could feel Neil's determination. They knew that the man who had faced storms and kept hope alive would not bow before any obstacle. Children would look at Neil and say, "We want to be like Neil, someone who never gives up." Neil often took the children to the shore, let them listen to the whispers of the waves, and told them, "This sea teaches us a new lesson every day. Only those who listen succeed." With time, the changes in the village became clear. Better nets, modern boats, and safer travel methods reached every fisherman. Neil made all this possible because he had never learned to give up. One day, Amelia said to Neil, "You haven't just changed the village. You've planted courage in our hearts. Your determination is what gives us strength." Neil smiled and replied, "This determination isn't mine alone. I'm just showing the way, but we all must walk it together." But Neil knew that to keep determination alive, sacrifices had to be made. He worked day and night, planned new projects, and looked for solutions to every problem. And when exhaustion took over, he would sit by the shore, watch the waves, and say to himself, "Neil, these dreams are no longer just yours. You have to stay strong." One day, an elder of the village said to Neil, "Son, you've shown us that with strong determination, anything is possible. This sea, which once filled us with fear, is now the reason for our success." Looking into the elder's eyes, Neil humbly said, "This all happened because of your faith. Alone, I could have done nothing." Neil's determination now burned like a light of hope in every heart in the village. People had learned that dreaming is easy, but turning dreams into reality requires courage, sacrifice, and persistence. And every evening when the sun would set, Neil would stand on the shore, look out at the sea, and think, "This journey isn't over. This is only the beginning." For Neil, this day would always be unforgettable, the day when years of hard work and sacrifice turned into a ray of new hope. The village shore, once silent and empty, was now alive with energy. New boats, strong nets, and the bright smiles of fishermen. It was the living proof of a dream that had once only beat in Neil's heart. The soft morning breeze carried a scent, the scent of success, the scent of faith. Neil stood by the shore, watching the waves of the sea, which now felt calm and welcoming as if the ocean itself was celebrating his victory. Martin, who had always stood by his side, smiled and said, "Neil, this all happened because of you. You didn't just save the village, you taught us how to live again." Neil replied with a gentle smile, "Martin, this moment isn't mine alone, it's ours. If you all hadn't stood with me, I could never have done this." That day, the villagers gathered at the shore, where Neil launched a new boat for the first time. The boat was named Hope. Children clapped with joy, the elders prayed for blessings, and the women's eyes filled with grateful tears. Amelia, who had always been the companion of his dreams, came closer and said, "Neil, I know your dreams are still bigger, but today you showed us that nothing is impossible." Neil looked at Amelia and said softly, "This is just the beginning, Amelia. We still have a long way to go, but today we can celebrate." In that moment of light, Neil's mind drifted back to all the struggles of his past. That stormy night when he had lost everything, the days when people doubted him, and those quiet moments on the shore when all he had left was a prayer for hope. Today was the day when every pain, every sacrifice, and every dream had found its reward. But Neil knew that true victory wasn't in personal success, it was in making others' lives better. A little boy from the village innocently asked, "Brother Neil, can we all be brave like you?" Neil knelt down, gently placed his hand on the boy's head and said, "Yes, you can. Being brave isn't just about fighting the sea. It's about conquering the fear in your own heart." By evening, as the sun dipped into the ocean, Neil stood alone by the shore. Watching the waves, he thought, this moment, this light, is the result of everyone's sacrifices. He looked up at the sky, as if remembering everyone who had walked this journey with him, even those who were no longer in this world. This moment of light was not just happiness. It was also a promise that Neil would never stop. He knew new journeys, new challenges, and new dreams were waiting for him. Happiness had returned to Neil's life, but success brought new challenges. Every day, new boats arrived at the village shore, nets were now stronger, and the villagers were finally living better lives. But with this prosperity came bigger problems. Problems that forced Neil to make some very tough decisions. One morning, Neil sat on the shore staring at the waves. Martin walked up to him and said, "Neil, we need to do something. Big companies are eyeing our lands. They want us to sell and leave this place." Neil took a deep breath, looking out at the sea, and replied, "We've sacrificed so much to save this village, Martin. Selling this land isn't even an option. But we need to find a way that works for everyone." Martin nodded, though worry was written all over his face. Soon after, a group of villagers approached Neil. One of the elders spoke up. "Neil, son, that company is powerful. They're offering us money we've never even dreamed of. Think about it. We could all live a comfortable life." Neil listened quietly, then spoke softly. "Money isn't everything, Babaji. This land isn't just dirt. It's our identity, our roots. If we give it up, we'll lose everything that makes us who we are." But not everyone agreed with Neil. Some were blinded by greed, while others were afraid that standing up to a big company could be dangerous. That night, Neil sat alone in his room, the sound of the ocean echoing in his ears, a storm raging in his heart. "Am I making the right choice for everyone?" he asked himself. "What if my stubbornness ends up hurting the village? But if I give up, this dream will be gone forever." This inner battle was tearing him apart. But one thing stayed constant, the whispers of the ocean, always giving him strength in his darkest moments. The next day, a meeting was called in the village. Everyone gathered, their eyes fixed on Neil. They knew the final decision would come from him. Neil looked around at them and said, "I know you're scared. I know some of you are tired. But remember this. We didn't start this journey because it was easy. We started it because we wanted freedom. If we sell our land today for money, the next generations will never forgive us." Silence filled the room for a moment. Then Martin stood up and said in a firm voice, "I'm with Neil. This land is ours and we won't sell it at any price." Slowly, more and more villagers stood beside Neil. Some were still unsure, but Neil's determination had lit a spark of hope in their hearts. That night, Neil walked to the shore and spoke to the waves. "See, if I'm wrong, guide me. But if I'm right, give me the strength to protect my village." The waves crashed against the rocks like they always had, but this time Neil felt like they were whispering back, "Stay strong, Neil. No matter how deep the darkness gets, light always wins." The days ahead were far from easy. The company increased pressure, using threats and tempting offers, but Neil stood firm at every step. He knew that the toughest decisions aren't made by taking the easy road. They're made by trusting your heart and standing strong. This was the moment Neil truly understood that real leadership isn't just about guiding people. It's about standing up for everyone, sacrificing for them, and carrying their pain as your own. Neil stood on the shore gazing at the sea. The sun's rays touched the blue water, creating golden waves, and the soft breeze brushed his face as if offering prayers. In that moment, a strange softness filled Neil's heart, the softness of gratitude. "Oh, sea!" Neil whispered softly. "If you weren't here, maybe I'd still be lost in the darkness of my life." Memories came rushing back, the days when he was just a fisherman's son, catching his share of fish and taking them home. But the sea had given him dreams, teaching him that with hard work and courage anything is possible. Martin slowly walked up to him, smiling as he said, "Talking to your sea again, Neil?" Neil lowered his eyes and smiled. "Yes, Martin, it's not just my friend, it's my teacher too. Every time I was about to give up, these waves reminded me that peace always follows the storm." Martin placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "And you've given that peace to everyone, Neil. This village is as prosperous as it is today because of your hard work and the blessings of the sea." The villagers knew that Neil's success wasn't just his, it belonged to everyone. Children played on the shore and called out, "Neil, teach us how to listen to the sea too." Neil would laugh and reply, "To hear the sea, keep your heart pure and always stay grateful. Then every wave will talk to you." One day, Neil gathered all the villagers and said, "We've taken so much from the sea. Fish, livelihood, dreams, happiness. Now it's time to give something back." They decided to keep the shores clean, avoid overfishing, and build new boats that wouldn't harm the sea. It was a practical way of showing gratitude, something Neil had inspired in every heart. That night, when everyone had gone home, Neil stayed on the shore. The moonlight spread across the sky, and the sea played with calm, gentle waves. Closing his eyes, Neil whispered in his heart, "Thank you for the dreams, for the paths, for the people I've made mine. And thank you for the strength you gave me through every storm." In that moment, Neil felt as if a voice came from the depths of the sea, as if the waves themselves were saying, "You have honored us too, Neil." And that is the truest gratitude. It was the most peaceful moment of Neil's life, a moment where he realized that without dreams, hard work and gratitude, no success can ever be complete. In Neil's village, the sunlight always brought a message of hope, but today was different. People gathered by the shore, their faces filled with worry and questions. Neil stood by his old boat, his heart calm, as if he knew that today's test would become the most important turning point of his life. The story began a few days earlier when a wealthy businessman from the city, George Black, came to the village. Impressed by Neil's success, he made him an offer. "Neil, you have everything, but imagine, if you join hands with me, your small boat will turn into a fleet, and your village will rise like a city. May. All you need to do is share a few secrets of the sea with me." Neil listened quietly and then replied in a calm voice, "This sea is my family's legacy. My secret is my faith. I can't sell that." George kept smiling, but his eyes revealed greed and a quiet, growing hardness. The next day, George started spreading rumors in the village. People began whispering, "Is Neil really honest? Does he want to keep all the sea's treasures for himself?" Neil didn't respond to the accusations. He knew that time and truth would reveal everything. A few days later, a stormy night arrived. The sea roared, its merciless waves shaking the shore. Many boats broke apart, panic filled the air, and George's brand new boat got trapped in the middle of the raging waters. The villagers stood on the shore, too afraid to act. Without a second thought, Neil grabbed his old boat and shouted, "I'm going out there! Whoever wants to come with me, let's go!" Martin immediately jumped into the boat, and together they fought against the furious waves to reach the stranded vessel. George, trembling in fear, froze when he saw Neil. You came to save me?" Without looking at him, Neil replied, "Humanity isn't bound by conditions, George." They brought George back to shore after a hard struggle. The villagers erupted in cheers, children screamed with joy, and George stood in stunned silence, realizing for the first time what true greatness looked like. The next morning, as the sun rose, George stood before the entire village and said, "I tried to buy Neil, I spread lies about him, but today I witnessed his truth. This man isn't just the hero of this village, He is the living example of honesty." Neil smiled softly and said, "Honesty is a strength that can't be bought or taken away. It's the light that shows the way even in the darkest storm." From that day forward, the villagers saw Neil not just as a skilled fisherman, but as a true leader. Children called him their hero, and the youth drew courage from his example. Martin placed his hand on Neil's shoulder and said, "You didn't just save George. You taught us all that the truth always wins, no matter how hard the path may be." That night, Neil sat by the shore, surrounded by the sound of waves and the cool breeze. In his heart, he whispered, "Thank you for the strength you gave me and for the respect I earned through honesty." And the waves seemed to reply, "This is your victory, Neil, because you never sold your heart." That moment became the most beautiful lesson of Neil's life. That wealth, power, and fame are temporary, but honesty is a treasure that lives forever in people's hearts. With time, everything changed in Neil's village, but his humility and simplicity never faded. New boats lined the shore, schools and small businesses opened in the village, and people began living happier, more prosperous lives. Martin often said, "This is all because of Neil's courage and honesty." If he had given up in the face of the storms, we might still be lost in darkness today. But Neil never saw himself as a hero. He would always say, "I am nothing. Everything is because of the sea and the prayers that stayed with me." One evening, as Neil sat by the shore watching the sunset, George Blake walked up to him. George was now a changed man, free from greed and arrogance. "Neil," George said, "I'm leaving soon, but I wanted to thank you before I go. You taught me a lesson that wealth could never give. Now I want to use my fortune to help those who need it." Neil smiled and replied, "Remember this, George. The greatest service is serving humanity. Wealth slips through your hands like sand, but the good you do with a pure heart lasts forever." Years passed. People in the village often called Neil the light of hope because he taught them that truth and courage were the greatest powers of all. Children grew up and found success in different cities, but in every achievement they never forgot to mention Neil's guidance. Even in his old age, Neil's eyes still carried the same depth as the ocean. But now there was a calmness within them, as if he knew he had fulfilled the purpose of his life. One peaceful day, as the sea quietly whispered to the shore, Neil sat listening to the waves and softly said, "Life is like the ocean, sometimes storms, sometimes calm. True success is being able to light the flame of hope again after every storm." His words later became a guiding line for the entire village. Never lose hope, because the sun rises again every morning. The lesson the world learned. Neil's story wasn't just about a village or the sea. It carried a message for the entire world. Honesty and truth are the strongest boats in every storm. Courage and sacrifice keep a person alive in the hearts of others. Wealth and power are temporary, but love and service remain forever. The greatest treasure is hope, which turns every darkness into light. Neil's life proved that those who dedicate themselves to others never truly die. They live on in hearts forever, just like Neil still lives in the memories of his shore and his people. And that's the inspiring journey of Neil, the fisherman who taught us the true meaning of hope, hard work, and gratitude. His story reminds us that no storm is strong enough to sink a heart full of dreams. Thank you for watching, everyone. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories. Until next time, keep believing in your dreams.